Hey guys, it's Michael. I'm recording this from my closet at home where I've spent the past 4 days in isolation. You're probably all wondering, what the hell's going to happen? None of us know. But we wanted to let you know here at the Bigfoot Collectors Club, we got you covered. We're going to keep bringing you new content in the weeks to come. Today's episode was banked, so we recorded it before the world went on lockdown. Next week, we're going to have our annual The Other Side anniversary sampler episode. So if you're not a subscriber to Bigfoot Collectors Club The Other Side, it will be a new episode to you. If you are, we will have a new Patreon release for you next week as well. So something new for everybody. And then after that, we'll see. We're definitely going to bring you new episodes. Format might change up just a little bit while we all weather this pandemic. But we're going to keep making new episodes, and we're going to keep you company during this weird time of a new brand of high strangeness. But let's worry about that another day. Oh, and just because I don't want to jinx anything else, Robert, if you're listening, is it okay if we do a story of high strangeness about you? It is? Okay, good. Thanks. Here's today's show.
It's Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce and Michael. I know a ghost story or two. Let's do this.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I'm your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host,
Bryce Johnson.
And absent today is super producer Riley Bray, who's off in the misty mountains of the Pacific Northwest looking for Sasquatch himself.
Pac Northwest Spindrift Tour.
With a guitar strapped on his back.
Hey, dog.
And a legion of fans at his heels. Joining us in the clubhouse today, stepping in for Riley, is Mr. Ryan Counthouse. How are you? Oh, he doesn't have a mic. He's holding a baby. There's Mr. Babies in the studio. He's a new character for 2020. Say hello, Mr. Baby. He's waving at everybody. Okay, guys, today's guest is a writer, performer, and co-host of podcast The Ride, one of my favorite podcasts. Boys and girls, please give a warm Club Scout salute to Mr. Jason Sheridan.
Yay.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm not going to lie. When you said, I'm going to play the song, I thought you just wanted to show me your song. And then as you rolled into the intro, I was like, oh, this has happened. Okay, got it.
I want to play everybody my track, my
Yes.
hot track for everyone who comes in, just so they can get an idea of how talented I am.
Yeah.
No. We like to play the theme song just to get our energy up a little bit.
Yeah, there's
That's
a vibe.
good. That's
There's
smart.
a vibe there
Yeah.
we're trying to create.
I appreciate you tolerating me playing my music for you, though. That's
That
very
explains the blank stare.
I was trying to focus. I was trying to
You're like,
be
how do
respectful.
I rein this in? You can't say no. It's
Okay.
Just-
Yeah.
Mr. Baby. Jason, welcome to the show. Obviously, our listeners know this. I'm a huge fan of Podcast The Ride. It's by far my favorite podcast out there. We're going to get into all this stuff in a minute, but you tell us a little bit about the show, about the podcast.
Oh, sure. Well, the log line has sort of always been a comedy podcast about theme parks hosted by three childless men in their 30s. And so we kind of delve into one attraction or hotel or
Parking lot
per episode, and then just examine the history and the making of and a cultural oddity. I mean, it quickly has branched out to our own cultural oddity interests and stuff. Because there, at some point, everything kind of became theme park in the world. Everything became theme park. Mike, or my co-host, sometimes says everything is wrestling. Like everything has the logic of wrestling if you examine it and break it down.
Mike Carlson, of course,
Yes,
who's been on the podcast.
on this show.
Yes.
So I think partially there's some crossover there because so much of American popular culture goes back to like carny shit and like traveling carnivals.
Yeah.
A lot of Bigfoot
Minnesota
roots
Iceman.
go back to carnivals as well. Like P.T. Barnum had a thing called the What's It, where people would come in and stare at a person in a costume, and that's kind of like that sort of predates the Bigfoot phenomenon in the United States. But that whole like sideshow freak, that's probably where our two podcasts branch off from one another. Although Yeti Bigfoot has a large presence in many of America's amusement parks.
They're in the Matterhorn. And in Expedition Everest in Disney World in Florida.
And Calico...
Calico
one.
Mine Train is solely about miners, California miners of a variety of questionable race, a variety of racial portrayal.
I was just on that not too
product
long
of
ago.
its time.
Well, as a lot of this stuff is, too, including everything P.T. Barnum did.
Oh, yeah. He was a nice man. I saw the musical about him. He was a great guy. He was a great guy. I just wanted to give those freaks a home.
The spirit of the American imagination.
Yeah, very accepting. Carnival, well, actually, carnivals kind of were accepting, but carnival heads, like, traditionally kind souls, thoughtful people.
Like, if you think Walt Disney's problematic, just go back at least 20 years earlier. We really have gotten better over time, if you think about it. It's all naturally. We're all waking up a little bit, but...
The Jersey Shore Boardwalks have replaced Shoot the Freak with... I don't know who... I mean, for a while it was Shoot Bin Laden, but I don't know.
Now it's just probably... now it's probably just like shoot the situation. It's very self-referential,
I guess so.
I bet.
Yeah.
Or it's just like a shark. Now it's just down to like, we can still be cruel to animals. That's fine. We can shoot bad animals.
Sure.
But I thought there was a Bigfoot in Knott's Berry Farm. Is there not a Bigfoot in Knott's Berry Farm now? I gotta go see.
I mean, Knott's is one of the parks I probably know. I've only been to Knott's a handful of times, and every time it's like peeling back another layer of the onion.
Oh, wow.
And it is a very charming park.
I love that
it's
park.
smack dab in the middle of a neighborhood. Like, there are houses real close by. We've gone backstage. We met a lot of the like behind the scenes people, and it does feel like everyone pitching in, like a theater company putting on a show. And what they do they're owned by Cedar Fair now, so they have a bit of a budget, but nothing compared to like Disney or Universal. But what they pull off, especially for Scary Farm, is so impressive.
I've been to Knott's Scary Farm. I haven't done the actual park on its own, like the real, like during the day. I hear Knott's Scary Farm is like the one to go to now, the Halloween thing. I hear the effects and everything there are the best.
I think
out of
it's
all
the
of them.
one to be. I mean, it's there's just so much passion driven, and I think Universal has great people working on it. They get great people, and but Knott's, I think, is just there's so much enthusiasm, and it's such like a fun atmosphere.
I feel like Knott's is one of those, if you want to be nostalgic for the way the park was, it's still probably pretty close to what it was when you were a kid, I would imagine.
Yeah, and some of their big projects the last few years have been like redoing, plussing up like their classic rides.
Aren't they bringing that bear ride back?
Yeah, they're bringing back it's a sequel. They had a ride for a number of years called Berry Tales, and it BEARY, and it was about a bunch of cute bears going to the fair, like going to a fair.
Yeah.
And so
you can watch the ride through, which I did because you covered it on the show, and it's fantastic.
It's great. It was designed by Rolly Crump, who did a lot of early Imagineering work for Disney, and was kind of like left Disney or was let go at some point and ended up doing a lot of very oddball work. Like, he was the psychedelic guy.
Oh, wow.
And did a lot of work for Six Flags and Knott's, and he created this guy we found out about called Marvel McFay, who's like a whimsical man. A very 70s kind of like Sid and Marty Krofft, or like Dreamfinder from Epcot, like Big Beard, and he lives in an imagination land, and
he's got a cloud car.
That sort of thing. And so he did that for Knott's. Just this oddball ride about bears going to the fair, and it was there for many years and eventually closed down, but much beloved. And so for their like 100th anniversary, they're redoing like one of their 3D rides to be like Knott's Berry Tales Return to the Fair.
Wow,
so
that's
it's a
great.
legitimate sequel. But then on top of that, maybe like 10, 50 miles from Knott's, someone got a hold of like 80% of the original ride and is reconstructing the original ride.
Oh, this is like the Rock and Fire Explosion guys who rebuild those.
Yeah, not dissimilar. So at some point you will be able to ride a recreation of the original ride and then ride the sequel to the ride.
All in one day.
All in one day.
That's like the equivalent of the Marvel movie marathons that they have at El Capitan.
Yes.
You could just do the whole saga.
Yeah.
in one get-go.
You know what I love about Knott's is it's got a little something for everybody. I can take the kids, and then there's thrill rides, and then there's great atmosphere. It's not overtly expensive either. You know, it's like you can actually, I mean, you plan a trip to Disneyland, it could break the freaking bank. But
it can really add up. But yeah, Knott's is great. And especially like the Camp Snoopy stuff, like the peanut stuff.
It's cute.
It's really cute. It's really well done. And also I am just impressed at like their merchandise for all. They have so much Peanuts, like deep cut. They have all these Snoopy family members, like all his brother, and Spike, yes, and the cousins, and
I'm big into
Olaf is the fat
Olaf
brother.
is the big one.
I'm big into the Frontier stuff too. So they have like a knife store and like a gun cap store and like all those like cool gifts, and you know, it makes it fun.
Doesn't Snoopy have a brother named like Marble that has like polka dots? Isn't there a polka dot Scoopy?
I believe
I like
it.
Scoopy. I like Scoopy as a knockoff.
You know, there was 50 years of it. There could be a Scoopy, you know?
He's like the Scrappy of it. By the way, I Googled Marvel McKay and I just got Anthony Mackie. So
Marvel McFay.
Oh, McFay. That's why. Have you heard of Bigfoot Adventure Park, Bigfoot Fun Park in Branson, Missouri?
No, I have the most passing knowledge of Branson, Missouri.
Okay.
Like I feel like I could. I'm not ready to go down that rabbit hole. I mean, I know about the Yakov Smirnoff Dinner Theater, where it's a theater, but you kind of have like a lecture hall kind of table that you can fold up, and the trays are magnetic. I think this was on the best show.
So the
trays
enough.
are magnetic, so they don't fall off. This is a thing that he did he did a commercial like bragging about, like, and you get like dinner and you can watch the show, but you get a nice seat. Like,
I'll be darned.
I'm looking at this. I'm at the BigfootFunPark.com, and it's basically just looks like a miniature golf course with a couple Bigfoot themed rides and some Bigfoot statues and a Bigfoot Easter Island head, which that seems pretty fun. I grew up in Kansas City, so we would go down to Silver Dollar City in Branson. This is kind of before Branson really, really blew up.
Right. And Silver Dollar City, I think we talked a little bit about Silver Dollar City on the, because that helped put Dog Patch USA out of business, the Lil Abner themed park in Arkansas,
which I would hear about but never got to go to. And the big rumor was in Kansas City for years that they were going to build a giant Wizard of Oz theme park there.
Sure,
that never happened.
This is Marvel McFay.
Oh, he's delightful.
Man.
Like,
that's a DMT trip gone wrong for sure.
He's one of McKenna's machine elves. He looks like a strawberry Santa Claus. All right, well, we want to get into Jason's personal paranormal history, but before we do, Bryce, Jason, I brought in some
BCC News.
All right, so this is from my source of all BCC news these days, People Magazine. This is people.com.
Oh, wow, our first.
Yeah, second, actually. Unoccupied pickup truck destroys sacred 1,000-year-old Easter Island statue. The damage is incalculable, said the president of Easter Island's indigenous community. A rogue pickup truck has destroyed a 1,000-year-old statue on Easter Island. The accident took place in the Pu-Apau sector of the island earlier. Jesus Christ, these pop-ups of this month. The cultural heritage organization Mau Henua said on Facebook. The truck had been parked, the New York Times reported Friday, but an apparent brake failure caused the vehicle to roll down a hill, crashing into an ahu, a stone pedestal that supports moai, the iconic giant head-shaped figures that have made the island famous. Joanne Van Tilburg of the Easter Island Statue Project told the outlet that the outcome of the accident could not be worse. The ahu are a fundamental part of the island's culture. This is a mortuary. That is what the ahu are, Tilburg said. This man basically ran right smack into a grave. It could not be worse. The man, a Chilean resident, has reportedly been arrested, CNN reported. The damage is incalculable, Rapa Nui, Easter Island's indigenous community president, said, adding that the moai are sacred structures of religious value for the Rapa Nui people. The crashes raised concerns about how to protect the island's statues. This is crazy. So
they're like, we only have 998 left.
Well, I mean, this is like if Stonehenge was knocked over.
Yes, which I think some of them have.
On European vacation.
This point.
Yes, yeah, Chevy Chase. This is literally like a sequel to one of the vacation movies. It's just crazy. You can see a picture of this just dumb pickup truck that just ran. Why was this truck allowed to be
His
there
brakes
in the first
failed.
place?
It sounds like not human error. It just sounds like, something that happens.
I know, but I found it sad and intriguing.
Yeah. I love how it could not be worse, but there were no deaths or injuries. They're like, this could not have gone any worse than it did.
It knocked over like this megalithic structure.
Yeah, you can put it back up.
I don't know if you can.
I feel like Easter, like they still don't understand a lot about those heads.
No,
they don't.
Like
no.
they, like Stonehenge, so much history has been forgotten about, let alone recorded.
Yeah.
It's
a strange island. I love when they do specials on that because there's just so many of those. There's like I think there's literally like 1,000 of those. I mean they cover the entire perimeter of the island,
and there are some with bodies.
Yeah,
right?
they actually go down.
I think go. Yeah,
for as high as they go up, they go just as far down. So they have bodies, and I mean they're monolithic to say the least. I mean, just to think how they created and carved and moved so many of those is anybody's guess. I mean, a lot of the scientists think they used the timber that was on the island, and actually that became the demise of the Rapa Nui, the people that lived there, because they used all their timber to like roll these monolithic stones into place, and they cut down all their timber, leaving the island basically completely void of any of natural supply. But that's just one theory.
I just think one of those trees could have stopped that truck from crashing into this.
If only they would have placed it in the right spot. I didn't know you could get trucks on. I didn't know there were trucks on Easter Island. Well, I guess there has to be, but
they got to get around somehow. Yeah. They ran out of wooden planks to roll around on.
That'd be a destination to go to. If you see it on like one of those globes, it's just like a tiny pinhead in the middle of the Pacific. It's a little frightening.
Have you ever been to a megalithic structure like Stonehenge, Jason?
No, I have not really traveled much internationally.
Okay.
I think the farthest I've got, my family took a cruise to Bermuda when I was in middle school.
Were you scared of the Bermuda Triangle?
I was a little paranoid about the Bermuda Triangle. Titanic was also either out or coming out, so I was like a little nervous.
You'd seen the trailer.
Right.
You knew the boat
I
snapped
just
in
knew
half.
it didn't. I think my mom had to be like, okay, the Titanic hit an iceberg.
Yeah.
Bermuda is very warm. There are no icebergs.
Right.
Although I think I had forgotten about the fact that Bermuda is not, it's just in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
It's just, you just go east from America and eventually you hit Bermuda. It's not in the Bahamas. It's not south of Florida. It's just a boat leaves New York and goes down and kind of makes a left. Or it just goes diagonally. Yeah.
I've never been there. I've never been anywhere tropical or cool. I've been to Hawaii, I guess that's it.
Okay.
But I've never been to like a cool island like that. So let's get into it. What, Jason Sheridan, what is your personal paranormal history, if any?
My paranormal history, I mean, I think the places that I've been to that feel the most haunted are movie studio lots.
Oh,
like
I love
especially
this.
Universal Studios and MGM, the old MGM lot, which is now the Sony lot in Culver City.
Yes.
They feel the most haunted. I mean, there's the sound stages on the Universal backlot that were used for Phantom of the Opera, which that set stood for ages and ages, and there were always stories about people getting injured or like people hearing stuff. Or
Did that one burn
stuff.
down in the Universal fire?
No, that's the entire other side of the lot.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's why the New York streets, the Phantom of the Opera streets, were closer to the lower lot of the theme park. And I think maybe it's so hard to track those sound stages. Like anytime we do a Universal Hollywood attraction, it's like digging on the internet to try and find old studio maps or old okay, so this used to be in here, and this soundstage. Well, this website says it was used for like My Mother the Car, but then this says it was used for a sound effects show. Right. So it's very interesting delving into that. But
I had heard that the Phantom of the Opera stage was still haunted by Lon Chaney. Like that was like I'd heard that rumor, which of course, like if you're gonna have any Universal monster haunt structure, it's got to be the Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
A-list haunting, yeah.
Hey, listen, I mean, as long as it's not, I think Lon Chaney Jr. was the pain in the ass one.
Oh, right.
But so that would
I like
surprise
that better,
me
actually,
more is that the fail son.
Right. Okay. He's just alive and still hanging out around the lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's just trying to. I also like the A-list haunting sounds like a Beverly Hills like haunted house, like real estate website.
I mean, and then one of my first jobs, like right when I first moved to LA, I moved to LA. I had done like a semester out here in school, interning and stuff, but I moved back out here and like was temping for a few months, and then the writer's strike immediately happened.
The worst.
And so but then I did get like a 3-week long job working in the like audience management department for the American Gladiators remake, which took over a massive soundstage, series of sound stages on the Sony lot. And they were more than happy for the, rental because like everything was shut down except a handful of things where it's like, well, the script's locked so we can shoot it. We just can't make any changes.
And the American Gladiators are like, infamous improvisers. So they're fine. They don't need any scripted lines.
They were all very nice. But the thing was like, then they just it was so mismanaged. Then they just like let them use another soundstage to hold the audience for a while. And the security guards would tell me about this. And it's like, oh, this was used in The Wizard of Oz.
Whoa.
And I'm like, I would tell people that I would start doing like, inadvertently start doing tour guide shtick to just keep people entertained. Well, they had to like sit there for a while, like, hey, this was used in this and this. And then, once I had to take a guy, he's like, I have a medical marijuana card. I need to take my medicine. And I had to like take this guy out to the, like, they're like, he's got he's going to be a pain in the ass. Just take him off the beaten path somewhere. And he's like, lights up a joint and he's like, so where's the secret room where they gave Judy Garland uppers? And I'm like, come on, man, it's midnight, I'm tired, the shoot is going so like, come on. And then I did go, oh, and immediately was like, what did he mean? Oh no, like that's how they got people to perform in movies back in the day. They gave them benzos.
He went home, did a little light Googling and was horrified.
I was horrified.
You should have just taken him into the men's room and be like, this was the spot, you can just, it used to be a dressing room, just smoke it in here. It sounds like he wanted to like smoke the joint in the place where she did uppers, which sounds even more twisted.
As soon as he started smoking, a security guy came by in a golf cart, was like, are you guys okay? And this guy had a whole spiel like, I have a glaucoma and I have a medical marijuana, and like, and then this was 2008, this was like 12 years ago, so it was still everywhere, but much less like
Yeah, you can still get into trouble. Yeah.
I feel like everyone was a little more paranoid. Like yesterday in Burbank, I walked by someone in the middle of the day. It just smelled like, oh, that's the most smell of weed I've ever smelled.
Oh, it's on every corner.
Yeah, it's
now.
on every
Everybody's
corner now.
up.
Everyone's cool.
Was that the Wizard of Oz soundstage where supposedly the guy hung himself, that you can see the guy committing suicide in a frame of film in the background in the deep woods? Yeah, did you ever hear this?
No.
So there's supposedly a frame when I think it's after they've picked up the Tin Man. I don't think they have the Cowardly Lion yet. I can't remember, where they're skipping down. And in the
it's
background,
a gnarly looking tree. It's like the woods where the trees come to life.
Yeah,
and they look scary.
And supposedly you can see a crew member from the shoot jumping off a rafter and hanging himself in the background.
Shut up.
Yeah, it was like one of those scary
just
things.
Just kind of hanging there.
Yeah.
But I
and
feel
you
like
can see
that's
that on the film,
Snopes.
like on the.
You can see what, like in the deep background, you can see kind of the
and
shadow.
some people say it's
that.
an animatronic crane that's back there, like a bird, like a heron. It's kind of like the Ghost Boy from Three Men and a Baby, which turned out to be a Ted Danson cutout. But like that was one of those spooky stories from Wizard of Oz, was that you can see a guy kill himself in the movie. Yeah, when really the real horrors were happening right before our eyes, which was what they were doing to poor Judy Garland.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what other haunted. I mean, Los Feliz in general has a real haunt. Like all those. There was a Halloween tour this past Halloween of a murder house, and that was owned by the LaBiancas, but it wasn't who were killed by the Manson family. But it wasn't it was just happened to be a different house they also owned, and there had been some sort of murder.
Whoa!
But it was sold as like tour Walt Disney's haunted house, because he owned so many properties in LA, not at once, but they kept moving as like the fortunes grew. Yeah. So they were like, tour the haunted Walt Disney house. And by the way, it was also owned by the LaBiancas. I was like, hold on, are they doing tours of the LaBianca murder house? Like, hold on. And it was like, no, the LaBiancas also just owned this house before they moved into the one they were murdered in. And it's
I love the like shared universe they're creating on this murder tour. The Murderverse.
I mean, LA has a million ghost tours and haunted thing. I mean, it is a very haunted city.
Yeah. I never knew the LaBiancas had another house that was supposedly haunted. I don't know if the LaBianca house is haunted. It's still there.
Yeah, it's still there. The Tate, the Sharon Tate house, that doesn't exist anymore. That's
destroyed.
That was destroyed. The address was stripped, I believe, too. The address doesn't even exist anymore.
They salted the earth.
Yeah. So I mean, so that's my like California vibes. But I grew up in Pennsylvania, southeast Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, and spent a lot of time in New Jersey too.
I thought I just assumed from the show maybe you'd grown up in Florida. Because,
we just went. We would go pretty regularly down to Florida,
down to Orlando.
And so my big memories of like haunted stuff, and I mean, Pennsylvania is just littered with battlefields, like just littered with Revolutionary War battlefields. So like we, with the Boy Scouts, would go to Gettysburg. There's like a 12 mile. It's like a 10-mile hike you can do in Gettysburg and get a patch for, and you just trudge through battlefields, and they have a massive visitor center and stuff, and a million books about haunted Gettysburg all. We're near where I grew up was right by the Delaware border, and so like as I got older and we all got our driver's license, would drive around at night, people would hear stuff of like, oh, don't go down that road. That's where the like inbred DuPonts are. Like that's where like there's people branch in the woods. Like they were essentially describing the hills have eyes, but it was like the DuPont cut, like that there was a million DuPonts. Like you hear there's like, oh, there's a million Kennedys they keep on the compound.
Whoa.
Like,
I've never heard of the like dark branch of the DuPont family tree before.
Well, the whole company's dark. I mean, they made their money selling gunpowder
and napalm.
So that was what I remember from that. And then once on a Boy Scout like camping trip, we camped in a park. I think it was a state park in New Jersey, and like came across a forest ranger. He's like, "Oh, do you want to come to the visitor center, watch a video?" And he's like, "All right, this is about the Jersey Devil," and he put it on. And I think I was just happy to watch some TV while camping, because back then you just kind of had to give up technology to go camping for a weekend. But then sleeping in a tent in the woods at night, like every sound, every tree falling or deer or something, I'm just like, well, that's the Jersey Devil coming for me.
Were you in the Pine Barrens?
But pretty much in the Pine Barrens, I think. Yeah.
We've never done the Jersey Devil on this show.
Haven't we?
No, we've never. I mean, we've mentioned it, but we haven't done a high strangeness about it. We need to. That's a fairly heavy hitter.
It's a heavy hitter.
It's a big cryptid.
Yeah.
I'd say a big American cryptid.
Yeah, he's got a sports team named after him.
Because it gets.
A puritanical origin story,
Yes. Which I believe began as a political, like, satirical thing that was called the Leeds Devil, and there was like somebody running for office with the last name Leeds, so they were trying to tarnish their name by saying that his wife or his cousin gave birth to a monstrosity.
Oh, sure, Goody Leeds.
Yeah, one of those weird, this is the way, before Twitter, this is how people would attack their political opponents, is by creating cryptids. So it was their offspring. Have you ever been to, when you were in Orlando, in Florida growing up, did you guys ever go to the Coral Castle? Are you familiar with the Coral Castle?
I am not familiar with that.
Bryce.
There are so many like off the beaten path tourists, which we drove by a bunch when we like went to visit the Margaritaville resort, the Ponzi scheme based resort hotel and timeshares.
Congratulations on naming a street, by the way.
Yes, we named a street.
The Dreamsicle Drive?
Dreamsicle Drive, yeah. So we went to go see our street and walked into like an I Am Legend kind of abandoned timeshare community. So that and it's like far out. Like you have to go to like the westernmost point of the Disney property and then keep going. So it's a great place to stay if you want to get to Animal Kingdom real quick, which I do recommend. That's a great park. But it's kind of like a little off the beaten path.
It's the Bermuda of parks.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
In Orlando. Coral Castle. Do you want to tell Jason about the Coral Castle, since you covered it on a show? This is pretty fun.
So Coral Castle is an American megalithic structure, a series of megalithic structures built by one Latvian man,
Edward Leeds Skalnin.
And if you show him some pictures, but these are large coral rocks, some weighing in excess of 2 tons. And everybody was kind of wondering, how did this single man, and he would work at night, create this small little park? And he created it as an homage to his love back in where he was from.
Latvia.
But what's interesting is, the mystery surrounding how he was able to move these large granite stones, and some even like the swinging door is so expertly balanced that you can just push it with the palm of your hand. But
wow.
So
it was like a park that predated, obviously, Disney World, but it's just a big stone monument park, and he claimed to have a perpetual motion machine.
Yeah, that's right. So he created what he called his Sweet 16, which was a perpetual motion machine. So he thought that he had discovered, in his own words, the secrets to how the Egyptians built the pyramids, and he held that knowledge himself. And it was hard to argue with, because, you would show up there the next day and the progress on the work that this guy had done was almost inhumanly impossible. It was insane to think how this small, tiny man could be moving these
he worked on it all by himself
stones
at night, so no one could watch how he was building these structures. And some people would be like, he's moving it with his mind.
Yeah, but
so it was just will.
Well,
it was just a driven man.
He was very driven. Yes, he was very driven. But a lot of people think
might have been in love with the battery that he made. We're not sure.
Yeah, his Sweet 16 was a 16-volt perpetual motion battery. It's I forget how to explain it.
I still don't understand.
I mean, this
story.
sounds like the American dream.
It really is.
A giant, lofty, unreachable goal.
Yeah,
and that is very quickly discovered to be like, oh, this is a con. This is like a Theranos, It's the American dream.
It really is.
With an
It's an
eccentric-
incredible place. I've never been there, but
in love with a type of robot. It sounds like.
But that was the thing. That a lot of people thought that he had created this free energy device, which gave him access to energy for levers and pulleys to be able to move these giant stones and put them into place.
Wow.
And that's why he would work at night,
Right.
because he could actually light his workspace all throughout the property with free electricity.
I see.
And this was done, I think, in the 1920s or something like that. So just about 100 years ago. And it's an incredible thing.
One of those first weird tourist attractions down there.
Well, that's like the last gasp of like American mysticism, right?
Yes,
like
absolutely.
that has been like a thing I've been obsessed with, like learning a little about lately. Is like, yeah, for a while the most popular religion in America was mysticism, was like trying to communicate with the dead, and there were detractors, and of course Houdini was, made it a goal, like in between illusions, to debunk like mysticism of like, no, this is how they know you have someone in your life with
He had a big rivalry with Arthur Conan Doyle. He was they were both big mystics, and spiritualism is the movement you're referring to, and they both thought that they could be in contact with the dead until I think it was one incident in particular where Houdini was trying to get a hold of his mother, and something went, wrong, as according to his own evidence. He's like, this is bullshit.
Yeah, he saw the man behind the curtain.
He saw the man behind the curtain, and he made it his life's mission to debunk mystics, mediums, psychics. And that doesn't mean that, there weren't the true medium or, psychic, but...
Sure. It still made his wife have the seance every year. For 10 years.
Yeah, and his big thing was he was going to, when he passed away, he would have a password that he would deliver beyond the dead to his wife, and his wife said she never got it. So,
have you come across the Fox sisters yet?
Yes, I cannot remember the specifics.
They
Fox
were in
sisters.
New York. They were spiritualists. They were the ones they'd hold seances and convince people that they were getting wrappings from, knocks on the walls and stuff from ghosts. And then they would like throw up ectoplasm, which was like supposed to be that's where like it comes from in Ghostbusters, but it was just like they would take like muslin or like pieces of fabric and regurgitate it and say that it was like the spirit form coming out of their body in the form of ectoplasmic materials, but they turned out to be like it was all a con as well. But it's pretty fascinating. That whole era is really, really fascinating because obviously, and that era had I feel like had a big influence on Disney and Disneyland. Like the whole Haunted Mansion is just born out of that entire era of spiritualism.
It was a movement. I mean, people were enraptured by it. I mean, they couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah,
seances were big.
It was just man's mind trying to wrap their head around industrialization and like. Just war with no war on a massive scale with no end, and so like everyone's like, but what if this dead could help us out?
Yeah,
here?
what if there's just not dead's not a big deal?
Yeah,
and we can talk to all of our brothers and sons who got destroyed in World War I.
Sure,
it's very sad.
That's what as we've done research, because we've been doing the Haunted Mansion every year on Halloween and doing it a little at a time, and the level of detail in that the level of work that it went into that attraction, and learning about like hauntings and ghost story and stuff of just like the flattening aspect of history of like, oh, okay, so. In the early 20th century, mid 20th century, this type of architecture that was very popular in the 1800s would look old and decrepit to them in the early 20th century and mid 20th century. To us, all this shit looks old. So it's just like, wait, this is just old. This is just all old. It's not like extra old. We don't have the context to understand that. But like, there is a lot of the mysticism stuff.
It's like why grandmas in movies and cartoons from the 50s always are dressed like Victorian women, like the Granny in the Tweety Bird cartoons.
Oh, yeah. Because she looks like the Dowager from Down Abbey.
Because that's what their grandmothers would have dressed like back then. To us, it's just in the 80s. obviously like, oh, that's what an old lady looks like.
Yeah.
But it was specifically recalling a generation that had passed and was now out of time. I love all that stuff. It's have you heard any of the are you familiar with any of the haunted Disney stuff, like the haunted Disneyland or haunted Disney World?
Some of it is very exhausting. Some of it is very like I if people don't, I mean, I don't expect anyone to know like the level of crap we know about this sort of stuff, but it is tiring to hear like, well, Walt's frozen. Walt's under the castle frozen. It's like, all right, man. Yeah, okay. It's
we
like,
had a listener yell at us because we joked about that, and they were like, he's actually buried in Forest Lawn. We know.
Pretty much every famous person is buried in Forest Lawn.
Yeah, or Hollywood Forever. We know.
I do. I have heard stories of people seeing I mean, and people have died on Disney. Everyone's like, oh, they don't die on Disney. It's like, no, there's public record. Like, this is not hard to dig up.
Yeah.
And people there are eyewitnesses that someone died. Like,
do you know about Dolly's Dip? Does that ring a bell?
Is that on? Yeah, that's on the Matterhorn, right? Like someone was a place they weren't supposed to be.
This woman named Dolly was unbuckling herself out of the car to help a kid or somebody behind her.
Yeah,
and then got decapitated or hit her head on an overhead track.
Yes,
when it was supposed to dip, it dips down under a track, and she hit her head and it killed her. And so cast members now say that her ghost haunts the Matterhorn.
Yes. The most morbid is the person who the in Disneyland and Tomorrowland there was a Circle Vision theater, the theaters that rotate, and someone got stuck between the wall, like
on the carousel. But it was
America Sings
yeah.
by that point. One of the bicentennial fever attractions. So, but there was no automatic. Now there's automatic stops if it senses anything. If it senses like a shoe or a balloon or something, it would automatic stop. But at the time, that wasn't built in, so they got stuck in between.
Oh. Yeah, I think a woman,
it
was crushed. Her arm got severed off, and she died or something crazy like that.
I believe a cast member.
Yeah, she was a performer. That is wild.
Yeah,
it was during a show, wasn't it?
Yeah,
or
it was during
the
day. Yeah, it was. It was during the day. But I mean, there's lots of the wild cats are true. There are like semi-wild, semi-domesticated cats all over the Disneyland property in Anaheim.
They come out at night.
They come out at night. They're spayed and neutered and fed and vaccinated by the Disney company, but they pretty much just it's like a natural pest control.
Oh, yeah.
So you will see, especially if you go to the Disneyland Hotel towards the evening, you will see cats.
Yeah.
And some of them will come up. Some of them are very friendly and will play with you. And but it's sort of like, that's an oddity specific to Disneyland.
Is there haunted Disney World stories?
I mean, I think at this point there has to be. I mean, there have definitely been deaths. I mean, that many hotels, people pass away just naturally, or people
commit
suicide.
Yeah.
Like, someone they were fine, they were okay, but someone jumped off one of the transit boats from the Ticket and Transportation Center to the Magic Kingdom like a couple months ago. Someone like jumped off one of those, and they're not very big, so the water's very deep. So like but they clearly the person was unwell, and so like when that sort of thing happens, the response is very quick.
Yeah.
So
shut that down.
Yeah, shut that down.
The light on the thing that we did a Patreon episode on the other side a couple years ago, but the light in the firehouse apartment, Walt's firehouse apartment, the reason why the lamp is on is because that was always an indication when Walt was in the park.
Yeah,
and the story is that after he passed away, there was a housekeeper who was tidying up, and she turned off the light, and she heard Walt say, "I'm still in here."
Oh.
And so they leave the light on now because they say they leave it on full time because they say he's up there, he's still hanging out. He's always, I'm still in here. just the annoyed with the
I think it probably depends on like the mood of the tour guide you get on that, because like Walt's always in this park, but then if you get the morbid one, it's like, well, there's a story about it. You know?
Right.
That's what my research turned up.
Disney Lot's pretty old. That goes back to the 40s, and so like you can tell which are the 90s ass building and which are the 40s ass buildings,
right?
But like walking around that once or twice at night, and it's just like, I know there's just these giant empty sound stages. Just giant empty spaces are kind of creepy in general.
Yeah, it's kind of like theaters. When you go into some of those empty sound stages, they feel full. Even when they're empty, they feel like there's activity in there. It feels like there's an energy in there,
and does not necessarily have the superstitious like ghost light that traditional theaters may have. You know.
Yeah, creepy stuff. So when you were growing up, were you into UFOs? Were you into Bigfoot? Did any of this whole pique your curiosity at all? Did you read any of the books about this stuff, or have you always been?
I definitely believed in ghosts, and I've always been very, very superstitious, and you know, now some of it I'm a little more skeptical of, but then there's also, I recognize forces beyond my control that I do not want to mess with. My girlfriend is very into a lot of this and gave me the Rider. We
tarot
had been doing tarot reading. She gave me the Rider Like she got a different one. She's like, oh, you like the Rider Waite one, take that, and that stuff I'm interested in, like tarot, the history of playing cards and the history of tarot cards and all the stuff that Ricky Jay was very like into, like documenting the history of again, this goes to mysticism and con men and card sharks and that sort of thing.
Have you had a reading or anything that you're like, oh boy, this is really striking a chord, or something
she had
happened?
done a couple like just 3-card readings for me that were like very shockingly accurate, like shockingly like past, present, future, and it's like, yeah, that's spooky. I've gotten, what's is it the 10 of clubs that's the bad one, or the Tower? I have gotten death, which of course is not the worst card to get.
Tower's tough. Tower means you're gonna go through a rough time.
Yeah,
but
unless it's inverted.
Right.
Because if it's upside down, that means you're coming out,
building
I think.
up, I guess. Yeah. I'm trying to get a little better at tarot. We were doing more of it where we'd pull a card after every episode, record, and we haven't done it this year. We got to get back in the habit of that, because I don't know. Sometimes it's just a cool meditation to make you stop and check in with yourself and be like, oh yeah, I need to be more mindful of this thing or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I read my horoscopes pretty regularly. I do stuff. I do think stuff does tend to break when Mercury is in retrograde.
Yep.
I do not like to buy new technology when Mercury is in retrograde, but also I lose track of it. We'll just go like, hey, Pisces season, baby. Like I will tease it a little.
I think Mercury in retrograde ends today. I think that's it. I think we're out of it now.
Good. I do feel great today. I feel like I'm shaking off some sort of ooginess. So that's good.
Lots of technical problems this past month on the podcast.
Have you?
Yeah. Big time. That's cool, because I figure, it's always exciting when we talk to somebody who's, a comedian or a comedic performer and is into this stuff, because we tend to find that there's a lot more skepticism in the world of comedy, I guess you would say.
I mean, people, I think you kind of naturally have to be skeptical. When I was younger, I feel like I was skeptical of everything and annoyingly contrarian. My politics have gone back around to where I was in high school. It's like everyone's a bum, and it's like, yes, everyone is a bum. Actually, even worse, a cabal of rich pedophiles kind of runs everything around you behind the scenes. They'll be speaking at the Democratic convention, and it seems like they've gotten their ways. There's still some delegate math where this could still work out okay, but you never know. But once all the Epstein stuff came out, and Pizzagate was real, it was just coming out sideways. We were just looking at it from the wrong angle.
All it takes is an island, just a little past.
All it takes is an island, or the neighborhood of Encino. They haven't even gotten a lot of that stuff out yet. I do think eventually I think what happens is people get to the end of their 20s and you're like, well, I have to be sincere about something eventually.
Yeah.
I have to do more than just do improv. I have to read some books, or I have to get some part of my life together,
or just like
therapy.
And at least discover the history behind some of this stuff, which is always fascinating, whether you believe it or not.
Yeah,
you know.
I'll delve into the history of it. Like I have just got so many gigs, just oddball podcasts on my phone of just because I did a couple years of journalism classes in college. That was my first major, and they were very much of like, oh yeah, just follow whatever interests you have, just follow the threads. And just keep going, and then like it's helpful to know a little bit about a lot of stuff. Now it's very easy to fall in the jack of all trades, master of none territory for that, but it did make me like get encouraged to follow my natural curiosity.
That's what Joseph Campbell would say. He was like, if you find an author that you like, it's better to read all of their work and then find out who influenced them and read all of their work and follow that thread back. He said you'll get a better education and a better understanding of the world and what you like than if you're just cherry picking books from all over the place.
Yeah, that for sure. Like, especially with like once you burn through the comedians you like, you and have to go like, well, who did they like and who did they like? And then like you start to really... Now, it's more and more work the further back you go, because then you have to learn historical context, because older comedy doesn't make a lick of sense if you don't know. Like, I remember a high school teacher trying to teach us Pride and Prejudice, but burying the lead that it's kind of a riff on those books, the books of the time, that, like, this is kind of poking fun at this stuff. And it's like, well, you should have given some of us the straight-laced stuff and then given us the poking fun at this stuff, because it didn't really make a ton of sense. Again, the flattening of history, it's just old.
Yep.
It's just old, and it's hard to know the parodies.
Shakespeare is very similar. So many inside jokes and references to like politics at the time that like if you don't have the context for that, you're like, I don't understand why this is funny.
Yeah, for sure.
And may not really, hold up today. All right, Jason, we have a game that we like to play with all of our guests. It's a rapid fire game. There's no way to win or lose. I'm going to go down a list of phenomenon, and you're going to, if you believe it, you say believe it. If you don't believe it, you say bullshit. There's no in between.
Got
all right?
it.
This is called bullshit
or believe it.
And away we ghosts.
Believe it.
UFOs.
Believe it.
Bigfoot.
Believe it.
Little gray aliens.
Yeah, believe it.
Out-of-body experiences.
Believe it. Yeah.
Demonic possession.
Believe it, because I'm afraid of what will come for me if I say don't believe it.
The Bermuda Triangle.
Believe it.
Alien abductions.
Believe it.
Loch Ness Monster.
I'll say believe it.
Time travel.
Bullshit.
Mothman.
I'll say believe it because I don't know enough of the specifics.
Reincarnation. I like your attitude. Reincarnation.
Believe it.
ESP.
Is that like telepathy?
Yeah.
Believe it.
Haunted houses.
Believe it for sure.
The Illuminati.
Believe it. Oh, yes, very much. I cannot emphasize enough how much I believe in the secret levers of power.
There's a face on Mars.
Oh, bullshit.
Skunk ape.
Believe it.
Heaven.
I do believe it. Yeah.
Hell.
Believe it.
Sea serpents.
Bullshit.
Poltergeists.
Believe it.
Chupacabra.
Believe it.
Atlantis.
Believe it.
Life on other planets.
Believe it.
Parallel dimensions.
Believe it.
The apocalypse.
Believe it.
Life after death.
Believe it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing.
We like it. All right. Bryce, what do you think?
Let me just laminate his membership card. There you go. Lifetime member.
I have always been more superstitious than religious.
Yeah.
So like I'm like, well, I
just
don't want to
covering your bets.
rule it out. Yes, I'm covering the spread. So
UFOs, your alien grays, all this stuff. Where do you think UFOs are? What do you think aliens are?
I mean, they're especially once the like Navy pilot, like once the stuff is starting to become declassified, and like the more and more news stories of Navy pilot and even recordings of Navy pilots going like, what was that? You know, it. I mean, all the Area 51 stuff. It's just all of the secrecy. It's like, well, you're hiding something, so maybe I just believe that you're hiding something.
Because the Illuminati is running everything.
Yeah, sure. And the life on other planets, it's like, I think it's presumptuous or narcissistic to believe that intelligent life only evolved on Earth. Do I believe that the life on other planets could be microscopic or like just something we can't quite, like vibration, something we can't quite comprehend? Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
So you said no to time travel, but what if aliens are us from the future coming to visit?
I mean, that's always I don't know. Maybe.
I'm trying to push you into a believe it category on that one.
I think time travel is harder. I feel like that's like, you know, like in Interstellar where it's like, oh, well, you were only doing math in you had to do math in 4 dimensions.
Right. You have to go outside of time to be able to
outside. Yeah. Like the comic book Grant Morrison has a lot of interest.
Yes.
You know, chaos, the crossover of like chaos magic, and there are like parallel universes like vibrating at different speeds than we are. I've been reading there's a great series of BBC adaptations of H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, cool.
Stories, but done as if it was like a serial true crime podcast, but they're discovering
cool.
like the ancient ones and that sort of thing.
Oh, wow.
But then made me go back and read the H.P. Lovecraft stuff with like annotated. There's a book called The Annotated H.P. Lovecraft, and like that has the footnotes of like during this period of his life, H.P. Lovecraft, who was scared of everything, was especially scared of the influx of Italians. Like,
no.
I mean, he was not a great guy. Like, I think. But the science, again, mysticism rising at the time, and so he was scared of that. And it's very interesting to see like what the BBC adaptations like keep and what they like toss out,
right?
Because he was a very complicated.
Well, anytime you get into like the horror of the other. And it's a work of art from at least 100 years ago. You're going to get into some real xenophobia and racism. Stuff. It's always, you know, it's tricky.
I think science fiction like authors are. There was a woman who won, I think, 3 years in a row, won the Nebula, when she was like, "Hey, maybe the." Trophy shouldn't be H.P. Lovecraft's head, and it was like just coming to terms with like, well, he is really influential, but like I think that comes up. I haven't read that. There's a novel, Lovecraft Country, and
I've seen that.
There's some crossover with that of just like, the cosmic horror, the like there is something terrifying out there. Like coming to terms with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I love all that. Like the ancient
conflict
ones, all that
and the
stuff.
Ancient, is very interesting.
But yeah, that's why people are complicated. Sometimes you have to leave personal beliefs of artists at the door and take work at face value.
Sure.
It's tough. We're all struggling with that these days. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for this week's story of high strangeness.
Dang.
But yeah, that's why people are complicated. Sometimes you have to leave personal beliefs of artists at the door and take work at face value.
Sure.
It's tough. We're all struggling with that these days. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for this week's story of high strangeness. All right, we're back. And it's time for this week's story of high strangeness. It's my turn.
Yeah.
And actually, I could not have queued this up better, if I may say so myself, based on what we've been talking about, because this story takes place at and around the turn of the century in Key West, Florida.
Great. I just saw Escape from Margaritaville last night, the musical. It was last night in L.A.
Was it? I wanted to go see it.
It was a trip.
Was it good?
The cast was great.
Yeah.
The cast was really good.
I've heard that it's very... a friend of mine, she had a friend who was in the New York or Chicago version of it, and he was like, it was real fun to be in. He was like, I don't know about the show, but it was real fun.
It's real fun. The book
play in.
is... There's not much of a book... with what they call the script in musical theater. There's not much of that, and sometimes it's very on the nose, getting the like, where's my lost sugar salt? Like, it's like you didn't need to set. You sing the song in 10 minutes. You did not need to set that up that hard. But then the second act was very fun.
Well, I wish this was about Jimmy Buffett, but instead it's about another famous figure from Key West. Jason Sheridan, are you familiar with the story of Robert the Doll?
Yes, I do know about Robert the Doll. Well, I haven't seen it, but Eva Anderson, who's been on our podcast, I believe saw him, went there for New Year's and posted pictures of Robert the Doll.
Okay, well, here we go. Key West is an island city in the Straits of Florida, the southernmost city in the continental United States. Its Spanish name, given to it by the Spaniards before Britain took control of Florida in 1763, was Cayo Hueso, which translates into Bone Island. The island, it was said, was named such after the remains of the native peoples who used the island as a communal gravesite long before the Europeans claimed the land for their own. By the late 19th century, Key West was Florida's wealthiest city. Its industry included wrecking, fishing, turtling, and salt manufacturing. In the early 1900s, a prominent couple, Mr. and Mrs. Otto, settled in a Victorian home complete with a tower turret room that overlooked Duval Street. Their young son was Robert Eugene Otto, a boy whom, by all accounts, commonly dressed in a sailor's outfit, carried around a small stuffed lion, and lived a somewhat secluded, friendless childhood. They called the boy Gene. Now, there are varying legends on how Gene would make acquaintances with his lifetime companion, Robert the Doll. The most prominent and problematic legend was that Robert was created by a Bahamian servant of the wealthy Otto family who practiced Santeria. This nameless servant loved Gene, but was treated wickedly by his mother. She crafted Robert to be a life-sized replica of Gene, complete with his sailor suit and stuffed lion, and as a companion to the little rich boy, before she was banished back to the Bahamas by Gene's mother for practicing dark magic. In other origin stories, the doll was made by a nurse that loved Gene dearly. Again, nameless because women's names are not important to history. The latest and perhaps most truthful origin of the doll is that he was a one-of-a-kind collector's item crafted by the Steiff Company out of Germany. He was painted with the face of a court jester, stuffed with excelsior wool, and given to Robert as a gift by his grandfather. It is believed that Robert was never intended to be sold as a toy, but had been made to appear in a window display as a clown. So Steiff or Steiff, that's you've seen, they sell like their stuffed animals are like Harrods. They created the teddy bear.
Okay.
They're like this famous German toy company. They make this like high quality stuffed animals. If you saw a picture, you'd go, oh, right, of course. They all have this sort of like, they look like they have actual limb joints and stuff, and they're like realistic looking animals. So they think Robert was made by this company as a store display that was like a circus, and the grandfather was like, I want that for my grandson. So, regardless of where Robert came from, it's commonly accepted that Gene received the doll in 1904. He named the doll Robert after his first name, and the two were rarely, if ever, seen apart. For all intents and purposes, Robert became Gene's best friend and constant companion. He took him into town with him, sat Robert at the family dinner table on a nightly basis, and of course slept with Robert in his bed. But this is where normal childhood play patterns ended, and something sinister grew. In the months after Robert joined the family, Gene's parents would often hear their son off in some corner of the house, whispering and giggling with the doll. It wasn't until they would sometimes hear a strange, deep voice answering back, they started to pay closer attention to Gene's relationship with his favorite toy. Yeah. Servants around the house began noticing strange things as well. They'd enter the dining room to find the freshly polished silverware strewn about. Unused guest rooms were discovered to have the bed sheets and linen stripped off the bed, sometimes ripped and torn. While making the nightly rounds, the servants would even find themselves inexplicably locked out of the house. Whenever Gene was scolded for these childish pranks, he would simply plead with his mom and dad. "I didn't do it. It was Robert. Robert did it." Mr. and Mrs. Otto didn't believe the poor boy. Still, there was something unsettling about Robert. Ill repute and suspicion for the stuffed boy grew among the servants, who would often hear creepy giggles hovering in the air and discover Robert in different places around the house, and at times swear that the doll's expression would even change before their eyes. Things took a dark turn with Gene. A concerning, reoccurring event began to emerge where Mr. and Mrs. Otto would awake in the middle of the night to the sound of their son screaming. They'd dash into his room to find the boy's furniture upturned and thrown about the place, clothing tossed about the room as if the wardrobe had exploded, and Gene huddled in the corner of his bed, sobbing. Each time they would discover Robert sitting in a chair, or seated next to the bed, or in the corner across the room, and each time Gene would cry, "It wasn't me, it was Robert." Gene's great aunt visited, examined the doll, heard the stories, and told his parents that the doll was possessed by an evil spirit. She placed Robert in a box and banished him to the attic. That very night, the aunt died of a sudden stroke. Disturbed by these unsettling events, the family took Robert out of the attic, and he was reunited with Gene until his young adulthood, when the Ottos moved to Europe, and Robert was once again banished to the family attic. So again, suspicious, covering all their bases.
That's a poor job of banishing a doll. Like, we'll just put it above your bed.
Yeah, burn it.
Yeah, fucking burn that shit. Bury it. Take it out of state.
She literally died that night of a stroke. Like and everyone thought that the spirit in the doll had killed her.
Because it did.
Time passed. Time passed. Gene studied art in Europe and met and married a concert pianist named Anne. They returned to the family home in Key West as a young married couple and moved back into the house on Duval Street. Gene became a celebrated artist and was once again reunited with his childhood best friend, whom he retrieved from his prison in the attic. Robert the doll once again became a common fixture in the Otto family. This time, however, he was a wedge in Gene and Anne's marriage. Robert took his place at the dinner table, kept Gene companion while he painted, and rested in a chair next to the bed while the couple slept. It's said that Gene would even take Robert with him on errands around Key West, much like he did when he was a little boy. So he's full on having a relationship. Anne was pissed. Hated this fucking doll.
Cucked by Robert. Cucked by the doll.
Cucked by a doll. The Robert the doll story. Eventually, Anne grew tired of the doll and made Gene place Robert, you guessed it, back in the attic. Mm-hmm. Again, not learning the lessons here. When guests would visit, they claimed they could hear strange laughter coming from upstairs and the pitter-patter of soft feet running along the ceiling. Gene eventually convinced Anne to allow him to release Robert, perhaps hoping to put an end to the strange events taking place around the house. Anne reluctantly agreed. Gene made a home for Robert in the turret room, fashioning the doll small, boy-sized furniture. And Robert was confined to this room, but rarely found himself alone. Gene spent much of his time in there with his doll, using the room as his new studio to paint in. Robert always by his side.
We'll put him away, but we're going to make furniture for him.
Yeah, we're going to... Instead, he's upset. Let's make his own room for him. Neighborhood children walking to school would often claim to see Robert glaring at them down from the turret windows. Sometimes he'd appear in different windows. Sometimes he wouldn't be there at all. Sometimes the children would claim to see Robert literally move between windows on his own accord. Sadly, eventually, Jean grew mentally ill and violent towards Anne. Jean would slip into wild mood swings, attacking Anne, beating her, and later claiming his personality shift on Robert's influence. Anne, for her part, believed that Jean believed in the power of the doll, whether it was true or not. Robert Eugene Otto died in 1974 after committing suicide. His body was found in the turret room with Robert the doll by his side. Myrtle Reuter bought the house in 1994 and discovered Robert the doll in the attic. Robert's antics continued where he left off, spooking guests with giggles and the sounds of footsteps. Myrtle claimed that Robert would often move around the house on his own, at his own will. And eventually she donated Robert to the Fort East Mortello Museum, where he now resides prominently on display in a glass case.
Is it weird that I'm a little hesitant to Google Robert the Doll images?
You should be.
I don't even want to look.
He apparently does not like his picture being taken and will curse visitors that capture a photo without his permission. Many visitors will write to Robert after learning their lesson. And this is from the Atlas Obscura. I found this article, and this is, he's pretty creepy.
Sorry to show that to you there.
No, I've seen it.
Yeah, Robert, I might have failed to mention, is dressed in the sailor outfit and lion that Jean would often be seen in. So this is from an article about the museum. This is a quote. "He gets probably 1 to 3 letters every day," says Corey Convertito, curator of the museum and Robert's caretaker. "But they aren't all typical fan letters. They're often apologies. Many visitors attribute post-visit misfortunes to failing to respect Robert or even openly disrespecting him, and they write begging forgiveness. Others ask him for advice or to hex those who have wronged them. Convertito says that they have received around 1,000 letters, and they keep a catalog. Robert also receives emails and homages. At some point, it became known that Robert had a sweet tooth, so people leave and send him candy. Just recently, he received a box containing 8 bags of peppermints, a card, and no return address. Exercising caution, the museum staff does not consume the treats sent to Robert. Guests leave him sweets, money, and occasionally joints. It's completely inappropriate, says Convertino. We're still a museum."
That's very Santeria, though. That's leaving rum at the altar.
And I remember when I first discovered this story, it was on some Travel Channel show, and I tried Googling this video, and there was a caretaker, a security person that was there, and her first night, she said she was cleaning up and felt a tug on the back of her jeans, and turned around and saw Robert running back down the hallway, and she quit. She literally walked out and was I'm not coming back.
This is the inspiration for Annabelle, right? In the Conjuring universe?
Annabelle is based on another haunted doll named Annabelle. That's a Raggedy Ann doll.
No.
But I think this was an influence on Chucky and all. You know, a lot of haunted doll stories come from this. The local folklore says that Robert's blonde hair and soul are slowly fading away with time.
Oh no.
His caretaker at the museum gives him routine checkups to make sure Robert is surviving the humid Florida climate on the regular. And if Robert is slowly dying, his legend will certainly live on. Some strange tales only get stronger with age, bested only perhaps by the bond between a boy and his beloved plaything. And that is the story of Robert the Haunted Doll.
I respect Robert for one.
Me too, man. That makes 2 of us.
I welcome Robert.
I welcome Robert, our new ruler.
We'll put a photo in the Instagram. It is the freakiest looking. It vaguely looks human, first of all.
Yeah.
And it has weird pock marks on the face. Handsome, delightful pock marks.
Yes, right. Of course.
But yeah, it's a freaky story. It's one of the scariest things. And
now it only goes sideways when you take a picture without his permission, or
yeah, it's just look. There are so many websites out there that cover this. I think we're okay. And I
was going to say, where does doing a podcast about it fall?
I asked Robert when I was researching if it was okay if we did an episode about him. So let's ask now, Robert. Is it okay?
No.
Yeah, so this is a freaky doll, and I kind of want to go see it for sure. If I was in Key West, I would check it out.
I think it's one of the things you get a slice of key lime pie. You see that big buoy that's like the southernmost tip of the U.S. Yeah, Robert.
You go to Hemingway's house.
You go to Hemingway's house. You go see this.
I don't know. Haunted dolls. What do we think, boys?
I had a My Buddy doll growing up, and that is not dissimilar. I mean, clearly
that's what Chucky was based on.
Yeah, that was what Chucky was based on. So my guy was cool.
Good guys.
Good guy. Yeah.
Haunted objects usually comes from. It comes from the person, right? It comes from the energy or the emotional static from a person. So it begs the question, what comes first? This child or these parents' sort of emotional trauma, or that was placed into the doll, or this doll really had a maleficent sentience or something. I don't know.
It's weird. It's weird and wild. I don't know. It's scary. The fact that there have been eyewitnesses of this thing, unless they're just both-faced lying, which I don't know why you would lie about seeing a doll run away from you. That seems
that
like
would fuck me up.
And
really good.
They also say that Anne, the legend is that she was slowly driven insane by this relationship that Eugene and Gene and Robert had, and that she apparently haunts the turret room of the house today. It's like a bed and breakfast now where people can go, or an Airbnb where people can stay.
So it's a cycle of abuse. It's a haunting cycle of abuse.
Yep. And they also say that Robert's spirit will haunt his disembodied spirit will haunt the house still today. But it's just really sad because clearly Gene, the artist, had some sort of really bad mental illness that had gone unchecked, or he had been possessed and influenced by an evil spirit. We'll never know.
Yeah.
But I guess Robert's slowly dying anyway, so...
I mean, that's sad.
That is sad. I kind of come out feeling worse for the doll at the end of the day. Jason Sheridan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Any final thoughts? Anything you want to? I don't know.
Don't mess with forces beyond your control. And respect Robert the doll.
That's great.
I can vibe with that for sure.
Advice. Where can people find you?
You can find me. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Jason Sheridan. You can find the podcast The Ride at Podcast The Ride on Twitter and Instagram, and wherever you get your podcast. And we have a patreon.com/podcast The Ride for the more for the real heads, for the off the beaten path.
I'm a member.
Thank you. That the smaller attractions are more historical oddities, and I think some of our favorites have been there.
I mean, the McGruff series alone is.
There's more McGruff coming.
I know that.
There's
I cannot
more
wait.
Coming.
I cannot wait. Great, Bryce. Anything?
Nope.
Like Podcast The Ride, The Second Gate, we have a sister show over on Patreon, Bigfoot Collectors Club, The Other Side. Please come support us there and unlock multiple bonus episodes every month. Once again, I'd like to thank Jason Sheridan for being our guest. Until next week, I remain Michael McMillan. For Bryce Johnson and Riley Bray, good night.
And go get regressed. Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced by Riley Bray. Our theme song is Come Alone by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. If you like the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps get the podcast to more listeners. To support the show, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club and unlock multiple reward episodes every month.